Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular town council meeting for Tuesday, July 12, 2022. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson. Carmody.
Here.
Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Barone.
Here.
Tata.
Here.
Testa.
Here.
Zandri.
Here.
And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Councilor Allenson is on her way. Item 3F has been withdrawn from tonight's agenda, will be brought back at a later date. May I have a motion on all items not removed from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through D and G.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Those items on the consent agenda passed. Item 3E has been removed from consent. Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute any and all agreements, contracts, and documents necessary to accept a 2022 State of Connecticut STEEP grant in the amount of $500,000 for streetscape improvements on Hall Avenue from South Cherry Street to Route 5 and Town Center sidewalk improvements.
Would anybody care to second?
Second.
I think that was Carmody and Zandri. Madam Clerk, take your pick.
No, Zandri.
Oh, sorry. I heard more than one voice. All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
Councilor Testa, your removal.
Yeah, to be honest, I removed this more to have the opportunity to discuss something a little bit peripheral to this without having to, excuse me, have a different agenda item set up. But for this, I would just ask that a brief explanation of what the program is and how it is incorporated with the overall town sidewalk improvement program, if at all, because it seems separate from that.
Sure. For the record, Allison Kapuscinski, Town Engineer.
Thank you.
The resolution in front of you tonight is, as Councilor Laffin pointed out, to support a grant application for the Small Town Economic Assistance Program. We're looking at a kind of related double project. The first part would be the improvements of streetscape along Hall Avenue. You might recall that a few years ago it was completed a project for streetscape improvements on Hall Avenue, which is 150, from River Road to Cherry Street. This would be continuing those streetscape improvements from Cherry Street to Route 5. The streetscape improvements, brick pavers between the curb and the sidewalk, street trees, and ornamental lighting. The parcels that would receive the streetscape would be our brother's parking lot parcel, just the frontage along Hall Avenue. I believe it's called the Elton Hall building, right across the street from there. And then the frontage across from Fishbein Park. Fishbein Park already has paver walkways and ornamental lighting and some trees within the park. So we felt it was best to keep that as is and focus on the other streetscapes. Because the funding opportunity is for $500,000 is the maximum that we're allowed to ask for this year, with the 80-20 match that we're eventually looking at, that would be a total project cost of $600,000. We did some very rough estimates to try to see how close to that we were going to be with the streetscape portion. and we were looking maybe between $300,000 and $350,000, which leaves about $250,000 for something else, which we thought very related to this would be some town center sidewalk improvements. I think so this is separate from our cap and non sidewalk replacement that we fund yearly through the cap and non fund. When when we're looking at this, we're really focusing at the town center sidewalks, and that's town center is established by planning and zoning map. That's essentially if you take the corridor of Center Street in between Hall and Quinnipiac down to Washington up to Elm, and roughly a block in either direction. So we figured that would be a great use of these funds. It supports what the funding program is looking at, which has to do with economic development in town centers. So that's what we're looking at.
Am I correct in my assumption that the original ongoing streetscape improvements from Community Lake through Hall and all end where this one picks up? Or is that kind of what you're doing with this? You're picking up from South Cherry on?
Exactly.
I apologize. And you mentioned town center sidewalk, so you clarified the work along Hall and Quinnipiac, or just Hall?
So town center, I believe it encompasses both sides of Hall and Quinnipiac. I don't have the zoning map memorized, but we are using the planning and zoning town center zone
Right.
for this project.
But this would take us past Route 5, starting to go up Center Street,
Yes, absolutely.
and potentially side streets.
Yep. Yeah, about a block in each direction.
Do you already have a plan for all of that work that this funding would be applied to?
We don't have a construction plan. We just decided on this project about 3 weeks ago. We're finishing survey this week, and then we're going to go right into design. It's certainly fast-tracked. They want shovel-ready plans by August 15th, so that's what we're looking to provide. Really, we're looking for that for the streetscape, and then the sidewalk replacement would be done in similar fashion to what we do now, which would be not predetermined. We would, when we're ready to do the replacements, we would go out to, a certain area and see what we want to replace and put a bid out for that work.
Are you putting the condition on this money that it will be that downtown area only that this money is spent on? And/or are there requirements in the grant that call for that?
I don't think there's a set requirement. That's just what we are presenting to the STEEP program. That's what we're going to prioritize. If the zone line is kind of arbitrary and doesn't end at a street line, then are we going to go the extra 50 feet? Probably. We're not going to be out there with that exact of surveys, but that's definitely what we're going to be focusing on.
The grant would allow you to go outside the area?
Yes. Yeah, we're just going to present it as, typically or roughly the town center area.
Fantastic. I have other questions about something, I guess I said peripheral to this, Mr. Chairman, so we could complete the discussion and approval of this, and I'd appreciate the chance to come back.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Allison. Nice
Hi.
to see you. I'm just trying to figure out procedurally where we are, because we don't have an application, right? And the resolutions before us approves us accepting, but we haven't been approved. So what are we doing here?
So I believe that this is typical for all of our grant applications, where the reviewing parties want to see that there's a level of support from the town council. I believe that the $100,000 would still have to be appropriated later as part of our match, but this just kind of shows them that, they're not going to be awarding us a grant that has no support of the town council. So it's really just to, hopefully show your support of the project.
Because you sort of answer one of my other questions, because there's no mention of our support financially in this resolution. It merely says that we are interested in accepting the money from the state, but we're not signing on, in this resolution at least, to appropriating any money. So I guess I would think that would be helpful with the state, right?
Well, so since this is pretty typical with grants that, grants are not guaranteed, right? So instead of tying up money, $100,000 in this case, for something that we may or may not get, we typically come back after the fact. once we do receive it, to appropriate the match.
Okay, and then the sidewalks in the town center, now I understand the streetscape area, you know, continuing in that and all of that stuff. And I think you were asked whether or not there's a plan about the other areas. And the resolution just says improvements. There's been complaints about, you know, asphalt patch being put on things. When we say improvements that are not described in here, are we talking about replacing sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay, and we don't have an idea as to specifically what areas in the town center, other than the streetscape area? Is there a particular, I mean, the downtown area that we're talking about starts down by the gazebo or just, was that westerly of that, and it goes all the way up to like Vinnie's Deli?
Yeah, it goes up to Elm Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just about Vinnie's Deli. And width is about half as wide as that. So when we say downtown sidewalk improvements, you could be talking about the post office, you could be talking in front of Wallingford Flower. I mean, those are two very diverse areas. Can you give us some information as to where you're actually talking about, like, replacing sidewalk?
Correct, so definitely replacing sidewalk. We're looking to make the permanent, you know, replacement. What we do is we take a look at any sidewalk that was temporarily repaired in the past. That could have been bituminous patching, it could have been, we do horizontal saw cutting. Anything that was done there, we have a log of it. So then we go through, and that's what we'd be prioritizing. We would also be prioritizing areas where the sidewalk and curb are not monolithic, so not poured together, especially if that's around Center Street and Hall Avenue. Those streets were recently paved, so the state would make us mill and overlay up to the center line for the road, and that wouldn't be very cost effective for the funds that we're working with. So to kind of stretch it, we'd be looking for, you know, sidewalks that have that break in between the sidewalk and the curb, whether it's pavers or grass.
And would that information be part of the application should this resolution be approved?
We really haven't narrowed down that specifically yet. Like I did mention, we did just get the survey actually this morning. I have to look at it, and we're going to finish it up this week. So, you know, it's still very much a moving part. The application's due August 15th, and your next meeting is until August 16th. That's why we're before you tonight with what you might think is maybe limited information, but, you know, it's very much a moving process.
Yeah, I'm also looking at the chances of success. So certainly if you were able to identify areas in the downtown area that are dramatically in need of work, and you were to include a photograph in the application, that's something that the individuals that are looking at it, I think, would consider, and you're more apt to get something. So I'm just trying to, I don't know what you've done in the past, because we don't see these applications. So I'm just trying to figure out, you know, what kind of support. The streetscape area, I know there's been discussions about the unsightliness of overhead lines in conjunction with this nice pavers, the period lighting, that kind of stuff. Is there any thought to putting some of that stuff underground as part of a more wholesome project?
My understanding is that the relocation of the overhead lines to underground is extremely expensive and requires a lot of land rights for easements. So it's definitely not part of this application. It would far exceed any funds that we're looking for.
Okay, and last but not least, you mentioned pavers along the Brothers parking lot. The Brothers parking lot doesn't look the greatest. I know we've appropriated money to have that done. Is it intended that those two projects are going to be done at the same time, or?
Realistically, I don't think that, just knowing how the STEEP program works, we probably won't even find out if we've been awarded till the fall, so this construction would likely be next year, and it's my understanding that Public Works is looking to complete the parking lot this year.
Okay.
So it's likely that the parking lot would be done first.
So does it make sense to, since that area is a smaller area of the entire, if it's the desire of the town to have pavers there, just to plan on having the pavers there done at the same time as the lot, and then there's some sort of reimbursement or something if the grant is approved?
I don't think this is eligible for reimbursement, the grant. I would have to check on that, but
Well, am I to understand if this grant is not approved, that there will not be pavers alongside that lot?
I'm not sure if we would find other funding sources in the meantime. But how the plans for the Brothers lot are drawn now, it would just be a grass strip. And so it really wouldn't be, doubling down on any work. It wouldn't be creating inefficiencies. So we would just be removing that grass and putting pavers in its place.
Understood, but anytime you do work alongside work that was previously done, there's some disruption, so understood. But thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Good evening.
So a couple of my questions already got answered, but I just want to kind of confirm the one part on the match. So I think I'm following. We don't want to allocate monies into a budget. If we don't get the grant, we don't have a need for a match, and we've got these funds kind of hung up that we don't need. If we get less than the $500,000, because you said 80-20, we wouldn't necessarily need to come up with $100,000. If we got $400,000, we'd have to come up with $80,000 for the match part. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I'm following. When we do this work on the sidewalks, really here as part of this project or any of our work, can you help me understand how we review tree impact? And what I'm asking is because, and I walk uptown a lot, so I see the heaved sections of sidewalks because trees are growing, the roots are under, and they're bringing them up. Do we make any kind of consideration to say, look, as much as we don't want to be taking trees down, we're going to be making these improvements, in some cases to the sidewalk, to repair potential safety issues with the end result of removing some of these trees that are causing the damage. We've got huge trees on those small strips of grass. They're heaving the road, they're heaving the sidewalk. In some cases, they're creating what I'll call a pocket underneath. I saw a situation with one of the houses that was being constructed on where they were backing up equipment up and over the sidewalk, and it actually caved in because of a pocket of space, probably from the tree growth and then when the trees were removed, the root cavity that gets left behind. So do we do any of this assessment when we take a look at spending money on sidewalks? And the reason that I ask is, hey, we're going to put in a brand new sidewalk area, and then the tree is going to heave it in 5 years. Do we make those kind of assessments or we don't?
Well, so when we look at permanent repair, or permanent replacement, I should say, for sidewalks, if it's obvious that it was a tree root that lifted the panel, we do consult with the tree warden to take a look at it. And, oftentimes that conversation is geared towards, when we make this replacement, are we going to be damaging the root to the extent that it's going to kill the tree? But as far as I know, the tree warden does not, take lightly taking down trees that are healthy. But that's something that we're constantly, discussing and definitely consulting with them to see how we could address that prior to replacing a sidewalk.
Yeah, and I know, and I've had a number of conversations with Rob Baltramitis about it in the same fashion. My concern is, we all understand what happens when we start to cut the roots of a tree back in order to put the sidewalk back down. We're not only damaging the tree itself, we're cutting back on what anchors the tree in the first place. So now we got a potential, the tree is healthy, might not die at all. It may just get weaker over 50 years. And you get a windstorm like even today, and that tree is going to start moving. And if it rocks enough, it comes down. So, I mean, I know the hesitation, and this is not necessarily the conversation with you, but it's more on the side of the tree warden responsibilities. But I think we need to be a little bit more concerned with this type of activity, because I think that as we make these changes, we run the risk of impacting these trees to the point where they may come down from natural occurrence, and that's partly because of the work that's getting done. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that we maybe look at the entire thing as a project, you know? If we're gonna do this because of this, if we have to do something with the sidewalk because of a heaving in the sidewalk for a safety issue, how does the tree come into the factor? And it sounds like you're doing this already, but, you know, maybe we need to try to look at it a little bit more. With respect to the town center improvement part of the conversation, and I know the first part of my question matches, but the rest is going to go beyond this. There's already been some corner curb cut replacements in the center of town. They basically have torn up the what I'll call the corner sections to replace them. Now, is it normal for us to take a look at just those sections and not the length of sidewalk? In other words, what made it necessary to exchange out all those corner cuts and not look beyond those points of the sidewalk?
So as far as I know, that was a state project, and I believe that state project was geared towards accessibility and making sure the curb ramps were ADA compliant. And it's also my understanding that, as much as the state may have initially installed sidewalks on their road, they do turn over the maintenance of it to the town. So they probably had their scope is probably very finite with, the curb ramp sections itself.
No, that makes sense. I hadn't even thought about that from a perspective. So when we are looking at our curb cuts, as we go away from the town center, and I believe I've already had one conversation with you about this. My concern is some of the crosswalks, and as one example, as you go up North Main, the last cross across North Main is at Christian Street. We have a four-way stop at High Street and a four-way stop at North Street, but only crosswalks on those side streets. There's nothing for the remainder of that all the way up to Dutton Park. Do we look at the sidewalk work that we do there, where the current crossing is only across the side streets? Are we making any considerations for installing any crosswalks and then curb cuts going across North Main? And I only preface this because I know that the traffic division doesn't necessarily like mid-street crosses, but these are controlled. These are four-way stops. High is a four-way stop, and North is a four-way stop, but the only place that has crosswalks are the side streets and not North Main. Is there anything in the future plans with respect to sidewalks and curb cuts there to maybe address those crosswalk issues?
So just so I'm clear, I think what you're asking is, could we take a look at a crosswalk across North Main at High or North?
Well, I'm putting it under the auspice of as we do improvements to the sidewalks going up. My concern is people are crossing North Main at High Street. So they're on the corner and they cross North Main. And they do the same thing at North Street, but there's no crosswalk even though there's a four-way stop. So the problem becomes, first off, back to accessibility, anybody with a wheelchair has to roll off onto the side street, then turn. There's no way for them to get over because there's no cut today. The other side of the concern of that is drivers are not paying attention all the time to individuals that are either A, utilizing the ramp on the side street and cutting over, or B, people that have full ability to walk. If I step across the grass into the street, they're rolling off because they've looked, I'm coming into the grass, and I go to step and cross where there's no crosswalk, and there's the inevitable quick screech. Now, I've engaged with other people in conversations about this. Well, why don't you cross where there's a crosswalk? Again, that's all the way back at Christian. It's 2 blocks. So, I think it's a concern, and it's something we should be looking at as we make improvements going up the road and address sidewalks in total, curb cut drops for accessibility, and then the potential to have that same issue going across, in that example, North Main. So I'm just kind of adding that to the discussion point as we kind of talk about this.
Yeah, just to kind of manage expectations. So what we're looking at for the area scope for this grant would be not even to Church Street. So this is, this would be far beyond that. However, I'm happy to, start to look into that elsewhere.
Yeah, and I know I kind of leveraged the opportunity to ask about it as we were talking about town center improvements and expanding beyond. But, My concern was that, my main concern is, are we looking at, when we're doing things, are we looking at everything? So I used the example of, hey, the trees, the roots, we're going to replace a section, are we thinking about that? And then it got me to thinking about, as we make the standard cap and non-recurring repairs to sidewalks going up the street, do we also think about looking at these other elements? If the state did for accessibility on the corner of Center and South and North Main, as we go up the street ourselves as the town, I would hate to reach those corners and have people go, well, we didn't even think about this. We're just going to add, we're going to redo the curb cuts on the side street and not think about, it may or may not come up into somebody's mind as they look at it. And I just wanted to mention it.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for entertaining my thought process on it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi. I have two concerns about the existing Hall Avenue improvements. It sounds like they're going to kind of just match this or carry on with that. One was already brought up, the underground electric, which I understand that's not going to be part of this. But I would hope in the future maybe we could look at that, because I hate to do all these improvements, because then you're basically knowing that they're never going to go underground, because you're not going to rip up all of this new sidewalk and the new lights to put it underground. But it would look so much nicer on the existing part of Hall Avenue that we improved if it were underground. The other issue I see there is there's a lot of weeds coming through the brick pavers right now. And so I don't know if for this next phase, if maybe we've thought about, I'm sure you have, but maybe using stamped or stenciled concrete that looks like the bricks instead. And I don't know what the cost of that would be, but I just thought I would make that suggestion, because I know when you drive by right now, the weeds are kind of looking not too good there.
Yeah, I believe that the weeds on that section of Hall Avenue is because it's permeable pavers. We'd be looking to use standard pavers for this project, so that would match more of what you see elsewhere downtown, which, as far as I know, there's no weed problems in those areas. So it would have, a thicker weed block and, thicker base and everything.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Councilor Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to circle back on something that Councilor Fishbein said and that you answered. We haven't been awarded this grant yet, correct?
Correct.
And if we don't receive this grant, do we have a contingency plan to do the streetscape on Hall Avenue?
Really, we're always looking for grants and funding opportunities, so that wouldn't stop.
It would stop?
No, that would not stop. We would keep looking for grants. If we don't get this
But
one,
we're only
then-
going to do it if we receive a grant.
That's the plan at this time.
Okay. And if we don't receive the grant and you don't foresee us moving upwards in the town center to fix the sidewalks that are currently in disrepair?
Right, so right now, our cap and non-funded sidewalk replacement is in zones 11 and 12, and so downtown, I don't know exactly what number it is, but it's back in the single digits, so.
So, excuse me, because I am new to all of this. Can you just explain the zone process for the sidewalk repairs and how that all works?
Absolutely. So the town is split up into 13 zones for sidewalk replacement, permanent sidewalk replacement. This was done initially, to kind of concentrate our contractor to a certain area. I believe it was probably a strategy to keep bid prices reasonable. You get different bid price whether you're going all around Wallingford or concentrated to a certain area. So with the 13 zones, we're, like I said, in zones 11 and 12. Zone 11 is approximately Yellsville, the Ridges, and then 12 is going across 68. We just completed our first contract in that zone. I believe it was Chimney Sweep, so that Chimney Hill area. It's going to be Weatherside, down Highland on the other side of 68. So that's the zone that we're doing permanent replacements in right now.
Sure. Do we ever deviate from that plan? For example, I mean, there's a lot of damaged sidewalks in our downtown area where we see a lot of foot traffic, and it's not only a safety issue, but it's a beautification issue for our town center. So do we ever deviate from this zone rotation to fix the sidewalks in our town center?
So we haven't since I've been here. What we do in the meantime is we address it temporarily, so either a bituminous patch or horizontal cutting. So if there are any, I think you mentioned that there are some sidewalks that are in disrepair right now. If you would be so kind as to give us a location, then we could certainly get those temporarily repaired. So we definitely want to address that immediately in the short term.
And when you say temporarily repaired, that's that tar asphalt.
Correct, the bituminous patch, yeah.
All right, and so there's no thought about modifying this plan to go into the town center to fix permanently the damaged sidewalks rather than using the asphalt, which, it's ugly, and I actually think it's somewhat unsafe from what I've heard. Would you be willing to modify these plans to fix the sidewalks that are damaged in our town center?
So I do think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. When our bids are written, they're written for a certain zone and then, temporary repairs elsewhere townwide. If we start to make exceptions for areas, then it's just going to prolong the zone program that we have going on now. So people in Zone 13 are going to wait even longer. What I am looking forward to doing is after we get through Zone 13, like any program or strategy that you have, I would want to take another look at it and see how we might be able to improve it the second time around.
Sure. Actually, out of curiosity, how long does it take to usually get through each zone?
It's very dependent on how many sidewalks and the state of the sidewalk. So, for instance, we were in the ridges for, it was before I was here, so I'm totally guessing on the number of years, but I think about 3 to 4 years. The ridges were mostly all developed at the same time. So I think all the concrete sidewalks were going at the same time. So that was definitely a heavy lift. When we do eventually get over to Zone 13, there's very limited sidewalk, and the sidewalk that is there is much newer. So the developments there are new. It's the High Hill area.
Okay, thank you. But I would argue that we should be able to make exceptions to unsafe and damaged sidewalks, especially in our downtown area where there's a lot of foot traffic and where we have businesses who want to bring people in. It's a beautification factor, and if it's taking a significant amount of time to get through some of these other zones, I think it makes sense to modify this procedure and to go into our downtown area to make sure our sidewalks there are safe. Thank you.
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify why we have the program we have. Mr. Thompson initiated this program of the zones because what was happening was there'd be hopscotching, jumping around depending upon who knew who, and the repairs weren't progressing in a consistent and predictable manner. So the people who are in other areas of the town are equally concerned about the condition of their sidewalks, their safety, et cetera. And so we felt to give everyone the same assurance that we would be addressing their sidewalk, we developed the zone approach. And that helped also in supervising the contractors who are doing the work. They weren't all over the town and much harder to determine who's doing what. So we spend, I think this fiscal year will be $290,000 on repairing sidewalks. Typically every year it's over $200,000. We certainly can do more if more money is appropriated for sidewalks. The other reform that has been made is that in the past, the contractor was doing the design work, and that became an issue because depending on how long they took to do the design work, it would slow down the whole process. Now our engineering department does the design work, and it's put out to bid. These are the locations, and these are the specifications. So there's been an effort to be predictable, consistent. More money would enable, obviously, more to be done, as this grant illustrates. But we are also somewhat limited by staff. There's going to be a point at which we don't have enough staff to be dealing with significantly increased numbers of locations, because all of this requires the supervision, all of it requires the processing and the bid process, et cetera. So we'd like to do more, and as Allison says, we continue to look at this as a priority, but the reason for the fairly strict adherence to the zones is to not be telling people, oh, well, sorry, you waited 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and you're going to have to wait more because we think there's another area that's more important.
You know, I don't disagree with the fact, or, you know, I don't think we should eliminate the zone process. I think that there should be exceptions made, particularly for our downtown area, where there's a tremendous amount of foot traffic, where it's a safety issue, it's a beautification issue, and I think we should make special exceptions for the town center, and only the town center.
Councilor Laffin?
Thank you, Allison. Need, excuse me, need versus longevity. How do you see like an average of when a sidewalk might need to be patched, and then how many years does that patch last before you end up getting around to it, or have to go back and repatch it?
It's very dependent. If it's due to a, tree root lifting it, then, trees are continuously growing, and, that lift could continue over time. We've had bituminous patches last quite some time. It really also depends on the snow equipment, snow removal equipment that's used. If it's a snow blower, then it's going to beat up the bituminous patch a little bit. But we keep money in our cap and non line item for the bituminous repair. So in springtime, you always get calls. The patch has been depleted, so you have to come out and take a look at it, and that's what we do.
Okay, all right, that's it. Thanks.
Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allison, I have to say, I'm very impressed by your knowledge of our town. I just want to, I keep on sitting here saying, she's a good one. What zone is the downtown?
Oh, now you're going to test me. So it's split up.
Well, it was a compliment and then a test, so there you
Right.
go.
Sneaky. I think it's like 1 through 4.
Okay.
Yeah, we have some very small zones in downtown that are very dense with sidewalk, and like zone 13 is huge because there's not much sidewalk, if that makes sense. So I think it's about 1 through 4.
But as new developments come into our town, planning and zoning, I know, pushes for sidewalks. So usually the new developments will have the sidewalks. So why isn't it, I agree with Councilor Carmody. Why can't you deal with this 2 ways? I agree with the zone philosophy, right? What Mr. Thompson put into place makes sense because then you have some sort of reliance. But our we keep on hearing the downtown is the heart of Wallingford, right? So I don't see what's wrong, every spring, take a walk through, this is what needs to get done, and it's a separate bid to do the sidewalks in the downtown area. I don't see that being a harm. You've still got the zone process going on, whatever zone is assigned, but we're also giving this attention to our downtown sidewalks. I have to tell you, I'm concerned about, I got a call from a gentleman who's in a wheelchair, motorized wheelchair. He's traveling long areas. He lives by community pool. He's traveling to Walmart, across Route 5 to Dunkin' Donuts, back around, by Carver's to McDonald's. That's far. There's like no sidewalks. So we're just talking about repairing sidewalks. And then, the gentleman says that he can't get to the buttons for the crosswalk and stuff because he's got to get his wheelchair up in the grass, and he can't do that with a motorized wheelchair. Those are things that we should be considering, holistically here. So, we aren't the administration. I think we should be giving more focus to the downtown area. I suggest something like, you could do the same thing at the same time. But also, Counselor, when he was a counselor, Shortell and I were doing doors one year. It was a couple years ago. We were on New Place Street. And we uncovered sidewalks that are asphalt out there. So I don't know if the resident put them in, But I know that zone's been touched. Those sidewalks were not replaced. So how do we deal with those areas where sidewalks were intended by someone, and it may have been part of their plan when they built the house? Planning and zoning didn't, require a concrete sidewalk, but they required a sidewalk. And literally, it's overcome with grass, and there's like a 4-inch patch in the middle. Those things should be maintained. So how are we dealing with those areas?
So to be completely honest, I don't know off the top of my head exactly. That's kind of a one-off scenario, right? So I wouldn't call that the typical. I do remember this coming up actually on New Police Street when we were in that zone, and I believe that we went and looked through historical photographs to see if we, saw any sidewalks in that area. It's interesting because I think that historically the town has tried to install sidewalks that connect two streets, right? So we tend not to just have one lot with sidewalk and then not connect it to some corners. So when we were looking at the historical photos and aerial photographs for that area, I don't think we were seeing any sidewalk on either end. So we probably made the assumption that it was done by a homeowner at some point. But I'm really not completely positive that's the same, address, but this sounds familiar.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor?
Just not to prolong this, but there's one other factor, and I can think of several streets where the issue became a question for the residents along the street. Do you want a sidewalk? And typically the answer is no. So we do have a variety of factors out there, not the least of which is often people along a street do not want a sidewalk. Sometimes they say, we'll put it on the other side of the street, but it involves concerns over the maintenance and clearing of ice and snow, I think.
Councilor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my one quick question just became 3 because of additional items that got brought up now, but I want to take the opportunity to ask them. So patching costs, like on Center Street, where they basically near against the cemetery wall, there was 2 or 3, I don't know what you would call them, sections of sidewalk that were so bad that they just basically asphalted them right over. Is that Public Works that does that work? Or, so that was contracted out to be taken care of? I don't want to call that a project per se, but an action or an activity like that one, what does something like that cost the town?
I don't know the unit square foot cost. My assistant town engineer handles all of that, but I do know that we spend approximately $25,000 a year in temporary sidewalk repair, so that includes the bituminous and the horizontal cutting. But, in comparison, one of our contractors, we had 2 contractors working on the zone program last year, and in 4 months, one of the contractors billed $160,000 worth of work. So, just to kind of give you a comparison as to how much money is being spent on the permanent replacement versus the temporary repairs.
All right, that's good to know because, again, another one of my concerns is how many times do we patch something, fix something before we actually go and replace something? And if you take those costs out of a budget, then you can't do another segment of sidewalk. So I was kind of curious about that. I know that recently, too, that there's been different discussions, again, going back to the lifting of the sidewalks, due to different elements, settling, shifting. I know you guys do that shaving because I see it all the time. I know Tom Dacey, he does get around a lot of town. I believe that's who Councilor Fishbein was talking about. And he has a lot of trouble trying to maneuver on the sidewalks. And it's not just the state of the disrepair. When these different heavings or holes get created, it's very difficult for someone in a wheelchair to be able to navigate through those areas. And that is actually one of the items that was brought up about the family of the gentleman who was unfortunately killed at Cedar Street. One of his family used to protest to him to stay on the sidewalks. And he used to complain that he couldn't navigate well on the sidewalks, which is why he operated in the road. And I saw him quite often. And then the unfortunate situation when he was crossing Cedar, going across Main, no crosswalks, he got hit there. So I want us as a town to have a focus on this because it's a concern of mine. And then when we brought up the asphalt discussion just now, there's a whole strip on South Main on the west side, right near Parsons Street. It's all asphalt. So I guess my question would be, when we go through that zone, whatever that might be, you know, it's a downtown zone, so maybe it's zone 2 or 3. Would we look at a section like that and go, okay, it's asphalt, it's hilly and bumpy because of the way that it's built and it's settled? Would the town make a general assessment on that section and go, we're going to take all that asphalt out and put down regular concrete there?
So through the zone program, absolutely. If there's a bituminous patch that is, you know, a need of permanent repair, the bituminous patch is temporary in nature.
So I just want to make sure I indicate correctly what I'm talking. This is not a bituminous patch. This is a stretch from Parsons Street, at least a lot long, on South Main on the west side. It is all bituminous. There is no sidewalk there. That connection is all bituminous tar. So if we were going through, there's sidewalk south of that. So if we were working that section, would a decision get made that bituminous shouldn't be there? Probably should have never been there, but it's been there for a long, long time. Would we look at that and go, well, we're going to tear that up and put regular sidewalks in here?
We could certainly take a look at that. I know we funded it actually separately from the Capinan sidewalk replacement.
Yeah.
You know, we've funded it separately before, and I think it would be the appropriate time when we're in that zone to, while we have a contractor out there, to possibly include that. I honestly don't know the exact area you're looking at, but I have some homework to do, so I'll go take a look.
Mayor?
Just again, a clarification. The bituminous is used because once we receive notice of a defect, we must make an effort to correct that defect within, I think it's 48 hours?
There's no timeline, but we try to get out there
Yeah,
very quickly.
Because once we have notice, we have a reasonable time within which to fix it, or if someone should be injured, unfortunately, the town is liable. So that notice to the town has legal consequences, which is why we move immediately to address whatever the situation is, either through horizontal cutting or the blacktop.
No, and I appreciate that, Mayor, and I concur that that's what we should be doing. But I also just want to kind of wrap my statement up. If you get an opportunity to go down South Main where Parsons Street is, that entire length, at least one house length, if not two, is all bituminous tar. And actually, there's a couple of sections that are starting to settle because some of the ground has worn away through rain. You know, rain rolls off that, and it's a decent drop to the street there. It's not a normal grass area. There's a drop. So that erosion is starting to sink that sidewalk, the bituminous area. Further up from that, there is actually a couple of patches that were placed, but this is a long stretch that's been left a long time like that. And my only ask at that point with talking about this piece of the topic is, if we're in that zone, because other than patching, I think it's okay right now, but if we're in that zone, does a decision get made that bituminous maybe never should have been the permanent solution in here, and as part of a project in this area, we should replace from point A to Parsons Street that entire section? It sounds like you guys do go out and make that assessment, but go take a look at that when you get an opportunity, because it's a challenge. And at that corner on that side of the street, there's no wheelchair access at all, because that corner drops off to Parsons Street and it's a solid curb. So strollers, wheelchairs, nobody can operate on that side without dropping down to the road. So that's another element that I think we should take a look at there.
And just to kind of add on a little bit, part of our permanent sidewalk replacement, we do look at ADA ramps where they need to be. So we will, you know, if one's outdated, not up to code, then we will replace it with those funds.
I appreciate that. At that corner, it doesn't exist, so.
Yeah, but we would, yeah,
Yeah.
still be looking at that.
Thank you very much, once again, for entertaining all these extra questions, because I know it's kind of a little bit of a divergence from what this topic's been, but I think you can get an appreciation that it's important to all of us up here. So I appreciate the work that the department does, so thank you again.
Thank you.
Counselor Testa.
Thank you, excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might as well get it all out of the way now. To clarify, the program we're talking about, not the STEEP grant, the program we're talking about always has to do with sidewalk replacement, correct?
Correct.
Does not entail new installations of sidewalks. Or it could if, but is there, and how does that happen?
So new installation of sidewalk, typically that's done through the mayor's office if we need an extension. If it's within, I believe it's a mile from the entrance of an elementary school, then it doesn't need, a public hearing. But if it's outside of that, it would need a public hearing. So it's a little more entailed. But if sidewalk already exists, then we have the right to go and maintain it and replace it.
Right. And I know that obviously any new developments, the developer is responsible for putting them in, and that's how they're usually installed.
Correct.
But we did receive a letter not long back from a Ms. Gosick about the request to have a sidewalk put in on South Airline Road, and that was forwarded to you. Can you have any update on if that's been given any consideration?
So we did look into this matter in 2020. There was a resident on Croydon Court that made a similar request. I will admit that I have a draft letter in my inbox right now from my assistant town engineer that I have to review. And, I guess I could speak to our findings back in 2020. Croydon Court is on the opposite side of South Airline as this resident recently requested it. So the sidewalk that we're looking at before would be connecting the sidewalk on Croydon Court to Woodhouse Avenue, which then, you cross the street to Kondraki and all the way to Stevens School. When we looked at it there, off the top of my head, I think we were going to need somewhere between 5 and 7 either right-of-way acquisitions or easements or, to do work on people's property, possibly takings to make it part of the right-of-way. The right-of-way is very irregular over there. We're going to have to remove several trees, relocate several utility poles, at least a wall in front of at least one, if not 2 properties. So it's going to be a very expensive project, but, as the mayor mentioned before, we do send out a survey to the fronting property owners because when you do have sidewalk, you're responsible for snow and ice clearing in the winter and vegetation year-round. So it comes with a little bit of a burden as much as some people might seek a house that has sidewalk because it could make their walks more enjoyable. Some at the same time will be seeking a house that does not have sidewalks for the same reason, for the, not as much maintenance. So we definitely take that into account. I don't remember the exact response that we got back in 2020, but it was majority not favoring sidewalks for the reasons that it would create a hardship if they were, I remember one specifically, she called, she was a little upset that we were looking, I don't know if she understood the whole process, and she was saying how she's elderly, she can't afford snow removal, and was very concerned about that. So that's kind of a typical response that we get, and we absolutely got maybe 1 or 2 in support of sidewalks, but we look for a larger consensus. The engineering department compiles the response to the surveys, and then typically some sort of a ballpark cost opinion, and we'll report that to the mayor's office to have a discussion on whether we want to move forward or not at the time.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that there was so much action taken
Oh, yeah.
in a relatively short period of time. We just got the letter a little while back. That was really what I was concerned about. Thank you. I have one thing I wanted to bring up, and this is really the reason I pulled this item off the agenda. And based on discussions and comments from the mayor and others, what I'm bringing up could be the answer to a lot of our problems. There's a program called the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. That exists already, but there was a presentation a week or so ago regarding transit-oriented development down at Hubcap by a deputy commissioner of the DOT, Garrett Eucalito. And during the discussion of sidewalks, as they inevitably come up all the time, he mentioned that this grant program was alive and kicking right now. And it was the recently passed infrastructure bill is providing approximately $5 billion through that program. So I'm bringing it up directly to you, but more to the administration as well. And my understanding of this is that notice for this would have gone to chief executive offices. We wouldn't have heard of this. Had we not had this meeting with the DOT commissioner, I wouldn't have known of it. I shared links to the program with my fellow counselors just so they could look at it. But it appears that sidewalk improvement is, without question, justifiable expense in this grant program. It's not only streets. It's designed to make, keep
It's really
things
safe
safer.
right-of-ways for
Keep
all.
safer. Yeah, but they mentioned sidewalks. And the grant deadline is September 15th. Applications need to be put in for this. And as the mayor said, if we had more money, perhaps we could do more sidewalks at any given time. This appears to me to be an opportunity to get a lot of money. And that led me to ask the following question. Do you have any idea, off the top of your head, being put on the spot, how much you think it would, how much is estimated to do all the zones? If I said all the zones tomorrow, do you have any rough idea of what kind of money we're talking about? If we're talking 250,000 a year that we generally, allocate to this, whether it's spent or not, I don't know, every year. But if we allocate that, if you said, oh, we're probably talking 10 million or 20 million or 5 million, I don't know. You have any rough idea?
I mean, in the millions.
Right, I would assume, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a loaded question because we have what the engineering department is capable of staffing for sidewalk replacements. We did adopt a strategy last year to have two contractors at the same time doing sidewalk replacements. So that was able to expedite, but we ran out of money in the fall. So, it was one of those, there is a balance to be found. Like the mayor mentioned, we did request and receive $290,000 in the sidewalk money for this current year. So we look forward to seeing how that gets spent. We do believe that if we were to receive, and this is kind of backtracking a little bit to the grant in the resolution tonight, but if we were to receive this money, then we would be able to staff both this grant, expenditures and the zone program out in the Ridges and elsewhere. So, it might not be a sustainable model, but it's something that we I think we're going to be stretching ourselves and seeing what we could pull off in a year. We do have kind of an all hands on deck approach in engineering. We're all trained in all the same stuff. So, we kind of look forward to seeing what we can accomplish. When we get past our capabilities of oversight, then we would have to look at bringing on some sort of a consultant to carry out inspections and visiting the site afterwards for restoration and quantity takeoffs for payment. And, there's a lot that goes into it. So, that cost would have to be factored in as well. And just, I guess, with regards to the Safe Streets for All program, I've attended several webinars on this funding opportunity. As you mentioned, $5 billion. I believe they're looking at $1 billion per year over the next 5 years. And there's two grants that could be applied for. One is an action plan grant, and the other is an implementation grant. So, I met with the chief of police before he went on vacation, maybe 3 weeks ago, to kind of start to pick his brain where he thinks we should be focusing for looking at a possible application for this grant. Whether it would be action plan oriented or implementation oriented. So this is something I could certainly bring up, the installation or the replacement of sidewalks. From the webinars that I've been in, I'm kind of inclined to believe that it would be a really strong grant application if, say, there was, several instances where there was a vehicular and pedestrian conflict, and if no sidewalks existed, and then, down a whole stretch, and they were like, okay, let's make that stretch safer, let's install sidewalks. Not to say sidewalk replacement would not be an eligible cost, that's not, what I'm getting at all, but,
I understand.
something that I'll certainly take to him, and I'll do some research myself and see if that could be a possible use. And, we tend to look at as many uses as we can for the grant money and then make a decision from there with, the help of the mayor's office, so.
Well, again, I'm encouraged again and not surprised that you're on top of that. But I'm glad that you're aware of it. I would only suggest this, and I suggest it strongly to the administration and you as well, that we look at the possibility of, constructing a town-wide sidewalk replacement project. Get an idea of what it would be. It would obviously involve, if we were to do a full scope, and we're able to get a substantial amount of money in order to do it, as many zones as possible at one time. Not only does it relieve us of tax dollars, we can take advantage of this grant money, but you'd certainly have to incorporate into the plan outside help. I would hate to see that we could do this, but your staffing wouldn't allow for it. I know you do as much as you possibly can, but a project such as this, which would only be larger by scope, we could hire temporary help, include that in it, if that was what it takes. Call them consultants, call them temporary, engineers, whatever it would be, so you could still continue to run your department, and we could have this project potentially done. I just think that when I heard about that much money available and what it could be used for, and been aware for a long time about the need to replace sidewalks throughout the town, it just seems like it'd be a terrible opportunity to miss. So I hope the administration will pursue this, whether it starts with you or not, and maybe let us know in a month or so what the plan is. Thank you. I'm all done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions or comments from the public?
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Somebody mentioned about undergrounding the wires downtown, whoever it was. I know that was brought up years past. It would be a wonderful idea because you can sit on this money for years. And so you can build up, because they offer this steep program. 17, 18, they really didn't offer it, but normally they offer this program, and they're going to try and raise it to $1 million a year. Maybe Councilor Fishbein can give insight on that, because that's the legislature that's trying to do that now, and it didn't seem to have too many people fighting against it. It would make downtown look wonderful down there if the wires were underground, and it'd make a really nice presentation for downtown. The last time we received a steep grant was 2020. That grant was for Brothers Parking Lot. And I'm just wondering how much longer that's going to be sat on. And I hope it is. I hope we don't use it for a while. How long can the town sit on that money?
Oh, I don't know if there's an expiration for the steep grant.
Well, we have a project that's ready to go, other than waiting for the installation of the parking lot foundation for lights. Once those lights, their foundations are put in, and this would include the parking lot over off Wallace Street, as well as Brothers. Once the parking lot lights have the foundations in, then the work will begin with the paving. So we're not in a position to wait. We really want to move ahead with that.
And just out of curiosity, I understand the Wood and Kaplan lot should be done, but what would be the urge to do the Brothers lot? Why do you have to do it so rapidly if the money doesn't have to be spent? Wouldn't it be, if you get this steep grant, wouldn't it be nicer to have the whole thing planned out and done at once? Projects normally come out better that way.
So there's no guarantee that we get this funding, so, I don't think that we're in a position to wait indefinitely.
It's not indefinitely, it's a few months.
Well, I do think it's a priority to get this parking lot done this year, so we're
Because?
looking.
The demand for the parking down there? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but there's no demand for parking down there.
I guess we could agree to disagree, but
Okay.
it's been a priority to get this parking lot paved.
All right. Who writes the grants?
It's a team effort. We have Susan Schott with the grant administration. She spearheads everything, and then she kind of pulls in whatever departments are needed to, write certain sections, and, but she gets on us about deadlines and, making sure that we address it appropriately.
Because I hear you talking about deadlines, because this has been out there for a while, this steep grant. It's been out there for a few months. Noticed. It was noticed to the town a few months ago. So I'm just wondering why, the council under the gun to approve something when it's, if the town wants to know about it. This is nothing with you. This is nothing with your department. Nothing whatsoever. It's more the administration. Who files the report? So STEEP has requirements. Who files those reports to the, for the STEEP grants?
The quarterly reports,
Quarterly and annual.
so engineering.
And you do them all every year for like the Brothers Lot and Brothers Lot and so forth. You're filing all those with the state?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering, because we had a grant writer, they would be doing that and taking some of your,
Well, she reminds us to do it, and then we actually
Well, but
fill
if
it
we had
out.
a
She doesn't have
full-time-
the firsthand knowledge of the progress that we have to report on, so.
okay, well. Just somebody's question up there, you can't spend any, this is one of those grants, you can't spend any money until the grant's approved. There's no reimbursement on any of these types of grants. So, all right, well, hopefully the town will get a writer, a grant writer, and help the departments. Well, because Mr. Savoni's looking like,
She just said her name, Susan Schott, our grant
she's
administrator.
our full-time grant writer. That's her title.
I guess I don't know her exact title, but, I mean, she's very helpful with writing grants, so.
So
And just to confirm, the announcement of the 2022 SEEP grant program was June 1st.
No, that's the date it was eligible to apply for the grant.
And I
The
believe
announcement- The announcement was earlier.
And I believe that's the date when we found out the dollar amount. In 2020, the amount was about $128,000.
It was $128,000.
We're
correct.
very, what projects we go for really depend on how much money is available. So we wanted to take full advantage.
It was available, and just not to, I'm just nothing with your position, you're doing a great job, I'm not saying anything, but the legislator approved that, so that was approved earlier in the legislative session. They approved the amounts. So if we had a grant writer or somebody who's following that, the legislature, with the governor, approves the amount of money that's going to be in for the program for steep grants. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just think everyone should be aware that when the legislature approves it, it waits for, often it's the Office of Policy and Management, or it can be DEP, whoever is overseeing the grant then announces the details and what must be done to apply for it. So that's the usual process.
Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
Fran LaFrance Procino, 14 Jackson Avenue, Wallingford. Hi.
Hi.
You're impressive. Thank you for everything you do. I just have a question.
I think the mic's not picking you up.
Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you.
That's loud. Is there a better way to do the patches? Is there a way that they can be smoother? Can your contractor?
We certainly go and check the work of the contractor after it's completed.
Yeah,
If there is, an issue, then we do have them go back and correct it before we pay them.
Yeah, it's just every patch I see, it's the pavement material is almost like a bubble, where it's not flush with whether they've had to, the fact that it looks like a muffin after it's been baked. It really needs to be flat for people in wheelchairs or with walkers. Lots of those in our town.
So what we try to do, typically when you see a long distance of bituminous asphalt, the patch, it's usually because the concrete underneath is spalling. So we have to, go on either side of it and ramp up a little bit to reach the elevation that we need for the patch. So, we do the best we can, but, we're not removing the concrete sidewalk underneath to make it all perfectly flat, but we do, do some gradual ramps on either side to hopefully help anybody with a stroller, wheelchair, anything like that.
Strollers too, you're right.
Yeah.
The flip side of my coin, it's just I'm not always seeing that. I'm seeing only like a bubbly scenario where it's really not flat. Is there that big a cost to maybe cut out that area and just cement it?
Well, that would be a sidewalk replacement, and that would, that's done in zones.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, is it that big a difference to maybe cut that broken?
Yeah, so, getting concrete to all these different places is very expensive. Bituminous can be done on a much smaller scale.
I just would like to see if they'd try and make it a lot smoother. Like you said, strollers as well, especially with the double wheels in the front of them these days. It's just so difficult for a wheelchair, especially a non-motorized one, to have to push that wheelchair up that bump.
Yeah, we'll keep working with our, vendor to make sure they're as smooth as possible.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. I appreciate that.
Anyone else? I see a hand in the back.
Barbara Cappy, 6 Demi Road, Wallingford. This is a tangent, and I'll blame it on Councilor Carmody for bringing up the phrase beautification of Wallingford. I've had a maintenance problem that have stuck in my craw for the years, specifically the number of years I've worked here in the town hall in the past. The town hall is deteriorating. You go down the hallways, there are chunks coming out of the wall, there are chips on the corners of the where the walls form a corner. When you walk in downstairs to the basement area, the tile it cannot be cleaned anymore. It's cracked in the elevator. It's embarrassing. There are sections of that vinyl molding that have just come off the wall. There's a section of the hallway going to the bathroom there on the bottom level where there's a chunk of the tile gone. The ladies' room near the town clerk's office was supposedly repaired a few years ago. The solution was to spray paint the tile beige. The contractor that did it sprayed over tape where notifications had been taped to the wall. That's now chipping off. The sinks in the bathrooms here are so worn, the enamel is completely down to the metal. It's absolutely embarrassing. If I consider this building to be the heart of downtown, and I don't want a town hall any other place but right here in the center, but much has to be done. It looks shoddy, and I think it's embarrassing to a town that has just held one of the best festivals around for how many hundreds of years. And I just hope that there's some kind of a grant or whatever that can be used to make this building up to snuff and look as beautiful as it potentially can be. Thank you.
Debbie Gross, Long Hill Road. Going back to the sidewalks downtown, out of curiosity, what is the cost difference of cutting out that section and replacing it with concrete, which would extend possibly the time frame in which you'd have to do that whole area versus the asphalt patch?
So I don't have any hard numbers for you. That would all have to go out to bid, but I'm confident that it's very expensive. When you do, go around for just one panel here, one panel there, our bids include a mobilization. So, you could be looking at anywhere from $100 to $500 per mobilization. So that's the starting point, just to get the contractor to the site. And then it's the cost for materials, which, concrete is much more expensive than bituminous.
Right. I mean, so when they say the concrete, does a truck have to come with the concrete, or is it they mix it there on site and repair it on site?
I mean, it would be up to the contractor, but it's not like a bag.
No, but all I'm saying is it would extend the life, and even when they do the asphalt patches, I've kind of tripped on them in different areas. It doesn't seem to be as smooth. And in the long run, it may be worthwhile to cut out that section and possibly fix it with the concrete versus the asphalt. One, from a safety perspective, two, from an aesthetics perspective. So just do food for thought. Sometimes it's worth the extra money, and because if that plan on replacing that zone might not be ready for 3 years, well, that's a long time. But in the meantime, you spent a little money, and you made it look good, and you made it safe. So food for thought. Thanks.
All right, there being nothing further from the public, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson?
Sorry, it's just for the consent item?
Yes,
that we handed
3E.
off? Okay, cool. Yes.
Carmody?
Yes.
Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Marone?
Yes.
Tata?
Yes.
Testa?
Yes.
Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes. Nice work.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you. On to the public question and answer period. Well, I think this is a first. Moving right along. On to item 6, discussion and possible action on ARPA committee appointments. I believe the mayor and every counselor is prepared to announce who their selection is for the ARPA committee, and I guess I will start. My appointment goes to Christopher Reagan, a Wallingford resident, service-disabled veteran, president, CEO of Reagan Tech Corporation, founded by him in 1997. Reagan Tech Corporation solves complex computing problems in the information technology industry. Over the life of the company, Reagan Technology has helped businesses of all sizes. Over the last 5 years, as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, Reagan Technologies has transformed into servicing the federal government, 194 of its agencies, making his company the top service-disabled veteran-owned small business in volume of contracts awarded in Connecticut. I believe this variety of unique experience will be invaluable in the committee. He is also a 20-year resident of town, married with 2 children. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you. I am nominating or appointing Carl Bonamico. He's a member of the Board of Assessment Appeals, Vice President of Liberty Bank and Branch Manager. He has decades of finance experience related to businesses and nonprofits, including most recently ARPA over the past couple of years. And he has a long history of generous donations of both his time and resources for numerous nonprofits across the region, with specific experience in reviewing, considering, and awarding funds of grants for both businesses and nonprofits.
Continuing in that direction, Councilor Fishbein.
I'm appointing myself. Thank you.
Councilor Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm appointing Amy Walsh. Amy Walsh currently works as Operations and Development Manager for Reset, a small nonprofit in Hartford whose mission is to help individuals in Hartford and surrounding towns develop small business ideas into entrepreneurial new companies with a social mission focus. Prior to that, she worked as a consultant on a state of Connecticut entrepreneurial economic development program, managing grants to foster place-based entrepreneurial economic development and to promote college internships to retain talent in Connecticut. She was born in Erie, Pennsylvania, graduated from Wellesley College, and moved to Connecticut to start her career in the biotech field, first working in the lab, then transitioning to launching and managing the corporate communications functions for 2 startup biotech companies in the New Haven area. In the community, she serves on the Hubcap Small Business Committee and is also the treasurer for our local Boy Scout Troop 4 at St. Paul's, and has served as the president of the East Stevens and Pond Hill PTO. Amy and her husband, John, have 3 children and have lived in Wallingford since '97.
Thank you. Counselor Tata?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't do like a write-up here, but I would like to appoint Mr. Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. We all know Mr. Gross, but basically I just feel that he's very knowledgeable on grants, as was evidenced during public comment before and during other public comments. So I appreciate his knowledge on grants. I think he takes a non-political approach to things, and I appreciate that. And so that's why I would like to appoint Mr. Gross. Thank you.
Counselor Testa?
I didn't realize we needed to present a biography, but I just thought we were collecting names tonight. But I'm going to be recommending Jesse Reynolds.
Thank you. Counselor Carmody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My appointment will go to Mike Bredinski. Mike is a retired attorney and has served in many capacities in our community, including on many nonprofit boards. He had previously served as president of the Wallingford Land Trust, as treasurer of the Wallingford Historic Preservation Trust. He chaired the $13 million school roof building committee and served on the board of the Yulebrook Boys and Girls Club. Beyond his civic involvement, Mike also served in our local government. He was a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals and a member of the Wallingford Town Council, serving as chairman of the council for one term. I know Mike will bring a great amount of experience to this committee. Again, I am proud to nominate him for this position. Thank you.
Counselor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My nomination is Mike Glidden. Mike Glidden has experience as a code compliance officer, assistant town planner, and director of planning and community development for the town of Simsbury formerly. Presently, he is the town planner and the development coordinator for the town of Cheshire, and he is the president of WCI here in Wallingford. So I believe that all of these assets and experiences that he'll bring to bear on the process for the Arpa funding, and I'm proud to nominate him for my placement on that committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Counselor Allenson?
I also did not prepare a resume for my nomination. However, I am nominating Jackie McNamee. I've known Jackie for several years through our work with the Wallingford Rotary Club. I met Jackie there. She is a lifelong resident of Wallingford, loves this community, has close ties with many people in many varying capacities. She is a therapist and has her business in town here. She is an absolutely amazing person and an asset to this town. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor?
My appointment is Robert Fritz, who serves on the Economic Development Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. My thought is that after we look at the application forms, which I think will be at the next council meeting, we can then suggest that the committee convene and at least start discussing its process and being prepared to receive the applications. Councilor Testa?
Will we be developing a formal charge for this committee?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so when Councilor Laffin has that ready, can he share it with everybody?
I appreciate your delegation, and I think he is more than willing, and so we will see that on a future agenda.
We'll put it right after the applications get approved.
All right. Councilor Tata?
Just a question. I know, I'm just curious. I want to make sure, does this need to follow the state minority representation rules? And I don't know if we need to look into that just to make sure we're okay with that in that regard.
Attorney Farrell, have you an opinion?
Not at this time.
We have a lawyer without an opinion. I don't think that it matters, and from what I've heard about those appointed, I don't think we have a minority rep problem based on those appointed.
Thank you.
But thank you for bringing that up. All right. Then moving along to item 7.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the contract to purchase 124 Lenny Hall Lane.
Second. Moved and seconded. We have a proposed contract that came with our agenda. Questions, discussion from the council? Councilor Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed in the memo in our packet dated July 5th from the town attorney that it says, attached is a proposed agreement for the purchase of 124 Liney Hall Lane. The purchase price is $45,000, and the agreement includes the normal contingencies. Is that an issue with regard to our agenda item, which says $52,000?
It's not. When we get to that, there will be further detail about the difference. There's some contingency money in addition to the $45,000 purchase, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get further explanation. Mayor?
Yes, let me, I have some maps here just showing the location of the property. Let me invite two members of the Conservation Commission, the Chair Mike Miller and Jeff Borney. Okay, I think it's on now.
It is.
So this is a map showing the property known as, well, it's owned by Stevens, and we're in the process of purchasing this. Muddy River crosses through here. There's about 95 acres, which we have discussed previously. We have received a grant on this, and the issue of finalizing and acquiring the grant and being able to close on the property is rapidly approaching. The property we're talking about is 5 acres located approximately right here. It bounds on this piece. It's part of the watershed. You can see the grade here is it's a ridge along this top here. Property we're talking about is on Liney Hall Lane. This is the Stevens property, top of the ridge. This is the property we're talking about. It's about 5 acres. This is Liney Hall Lane. Difficult private road for any kind of public equipment, fire trucks, et cetera, to be able to get to pieces at the top here. This helps support the open space that we have right next to it. And I'll ask these gentlemen to make comments as they deem appropriate.
Jeff Borney, 20 Sylvan Avenue.
Is that mic still on? I'm not sure it's big.
Jeff Borney, 20 Sylvan Avenue. Okay. So this opportunity came up when this property that abuts the Stevens property went up for sale. We walked the property, we met with the owners, we gave a report to the council, we recommended the purchase of this property. It's totally in the watershed, as is the Stevens property, so we would be adding another 5 acres of pristine, undeveloped land, which would be totally protected in the watershed. It has many other attributes. It's entirely wooded. It has a trap rock ridge along the eastern boundary, and it kind of concludes what some people term as Washington Ridge that also goes along the back of the Stevens property. I want to commend the council or the administration, but it seems like we're getting a really fair deal here with the owner and with the town in securing this property.
Mr. Borney, could you just remind us the capacity in which you sit to recommend this purchase.
So at the present time, I chair the Land Acquisition Committee of the Conservation Commission. Thank you. I chaired that commission from 1998 to 2014, and then Mike has taken over from Mary Heffernan, who had an interim term as the chair there.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Jeff.
if you could
So-
just remind us who you are for the record, please, Mr. Miller.
Sorry, yeah, Mike Miller, Williams. Sorry about that. Mike Miller, Williams Road, and just to add to what Jeff said, you know, this is the 5 acres, all of the water, and this is all in a high priority Wallingford, you know, water zone. All of this water flows. The Muddy River bisects this property down here. All of the water on this property flows ultimately onto the land next to it into a perched, something called a perched watershed, which hangs above the river, and that holds the water and releases it slowly down into the river. So, you know, preserving and adding this 5 acres to this piece of land prevents, obviously, development and pollution, potential pollution sources from entering that perched wetlands, and from there into our reservoir. So, and it also, of course, adds that much more potential water. So, it's a nice piece of land, but ultimately, it really also, purchasing it, saving it, saves the town potential future maintenance and services costs. So.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to get a refresh to my memory. As we end up with, you know, if this action is approved tonight, we end up with that 5 acre piece and ultimately the end result of the Stevens property purchase as well. Being that they're both open space, are residents able to hike and walk the area?
The Stevens property is going to be purchased, I believe, as a watershed property, and it'll have some restrictions on it, but that is open, will be open for passive recreational use. So not up to us to decide, but I would assume this 5 acre parcel would also be, you know, open to the public.
So either parcel, right?
Yes.
So I mean, you know, we've had the prior discussions about the potential difficulties of being able to get town services up that piece of the
Right.
undeveloped road area,
Yeah.
emergency vehicles, and all of that. I want to be able to, you know, again, trying to be a steward of town funds and people's tax dollars, that if we make a purchase like this, at least that we get some level of access. And it sounds like
Right.
regular open space, foot type traffic is going to be permissible.
That is, yeah, that will be available. The access would be off of Williams Road, and people would be hiking up through the Stevens property to get to that. But there is access through the Stevens property.
So now you mentioned off of Williams Road. So just help me here with Liney
Sure.
Hall. Now, is that a private road, and that's why town regular residents are not allowed to traverse that area?
It's a private road, but also it's non-developed. It's really just a wooded path at this point along the top of the ridge. So the access to this would be from Williams Road over here, where we're going to have a small parking. The plan is to have a small parking area and foot trails that extend up into the Stevens property, and from there onto this property.
Okay, and the only reason that I mentioned that to make it so that it comes out as a direct point, we've had situations in the past, and I'll just use one example that pops into my head. The linear trail and the access on the Yalesville side of town came with certain conditions. Car traffic could traverse through the condominium complex, but foot traffic could not. So I wanted to make it clear that Liney Hall Road is not going to be the access point for this. When we get to the point where the purchases are complete, and, provided that this action passes, that people's ability to enjoy that open space would be based off of the small area off of Williams Road. You could walk through the property, access this additional 5 acres as well, but you wouldn't be able to bring car traffic up closer or secondarily through that access. That's a private road, and it doesn't grant residential citizen access.
That's correct.
All right, I just wanted to get that out there. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm personally hesitant to approve this. A few reasons. Number one, I just have gotten the feeling over the past few years that sometimes we just buy property just to buy it. I understand the watershed district with the larger piece, and I was supportive of that. But we get these requests often, and sometimes I'm not really sure why we're buying so much. I know I brought this up before, but I think we have beautiful areas in town that should be allowed for recreation. We have issues there. Tyler Mill is the big example. So we buy properties, we say they're going to be for people to enjoy and to use for recreation. This one would be passive recreation, sounds like. And then we have issues where the public is not able to use them for a variety of reasons that we don't ever seem to get to the bottom of. And then I guess just generally, philosophically, without a very, very solid reason, I think I just have a little bit of an issue of, the government buying up property where maybe a private resident might want to buy a piece of property to build on, and then, they're constantly having to compete against the government to buy property. Maybe they want a private piece like this to build a house on a wooded lot. So, I'm certainly still listening to everything, but I'm kind of leaning towards no at this point. Thank you.
Just to address your comment quickly, I've been at this since 1998, so I've been around, and every now and then we have to remind town council people that when the town acquires open space land, we don't have to pay for education of children when they build a house. We don't have to pay for various kinds of improvements. And so in general, it's a pretty good deal for the town to get open space property in terms of the benefit to the general taxpayers. And I just hope you understand that undeveloped land, the town doesn't have that many issues with it. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I
Mayor.
just want to explain in terms of the contract. The purchase price for the property is $45,000. The additional $7,000 is for the environmental review as well as title insurance.
Thank you. That's the next item on the agenda. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson?
Yes.
Carmody?
Yes.
Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Marone?
Yes.
Tata?
No.
Testa?
Yes.
Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes, the motion passes. Can we have a motion on number 8, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve an appropriation of funds in the amount of $52,000 from Cap and Non-Fund number 301 to 124 Linney Hall Lane Fund, 301 to be determined for the purchase of 124 Linney Hall Lane.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the council. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, you just told us the $7,000 deviation or addition was two things, title insurance and something else?
The environmental, Phase 1 environmental.
Okay, so title insurance.
So, it's title work.
It's title work.
Yeah, because title insurance is like $4,500, I mean, $450. So it's title work by whom? So title search for a parcel like this is going to be like $300, $500. You're not gonna pay anything more than that for a title for this parcel, right? So how are we getting $7,000?
All I have is Attorney Small's notes, and she said environmental testing, title work, and
The mic is not picking you up, Attorney Farrell.
Her memo to me says environmental testing, title work, and adjustments with the purchase price of $45,000 add up to $52,000 total. So it's $7,000 for the additional work. She doesn't specify how much for each.
So phase one on a parcel like this is, I mean, we were doing a phase two over on that parcel by Tyler Mill. I think it was estimated at being $3,000. This is a phase one. So assuming a phase one on this parcel is $1,500, title search $500, you're at $2,000. What are the other incidentals?
You know, all I can say is that the purchase price is $45,000. If the others don't cost that much, then $52,000 might be more than is needed, but that is what her memo to me says.
So the item before us is to approve that amount or up to that amount?
I would say up to that amount.
So I'm just looking at the agenda item, and as submitted, we are expending that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the money is there if it's needed, but obviously, if we don't have a cause to spend that money, we're not going to spend it. The purchase price for the property, it won't change, so the Corporation Council indicated the additional amount was needed in order to accomplish the closing, but that doesn't mean that it has to be spent. That will only be spent if there's an acceptable bill for services rendered that causes that amount to be spent.
I understand all of that. I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, based upon the estimates that I'm running through my head, the expenses are about $2,000, and the question is, where are the extra $5,000? So, you know, I don't want to belabor this. I'm just looking to get some, so is it possible that we can be informed once this thing happens, what the actual costs were, so that we can just link this up?
That's certainly a reasonable request.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions or comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson?
Yes.
Carmody?
Yes.
Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Marone?
Yes.
Tata?
No.
Testa?
Yes.
Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes, the motion passes. There being no further business on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned.